And welcome to our new episode of DM Goes Local. My name is Manuela Colarella. I'm the coordinator of DM25 Dublin DSC, and I'm very happy to welcome today Amanda Nyoni. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce you. Amanda arrived in Ireland in 2019, and she quickly found herself advocating for human rights and inclusion. And she became a representative of Movement for Asylum Seekers in Ireland, also called MASI, in Tullamore. She successfully organized a Black Lives Matter demonstration, which saw both marginalized community and the Irish community united for a common cause. Although she graduated with a BBA in accounting, her leadership skills were portrayed from a young age, having held in a position in the Students' Representative Council and represented her university at the African Union Summit. She's currently pursuing a degree in leadership and community development. Talking about our organization, MASI is an independent platform for asylum seekers to join together in unity and purpose. The collective seeks justice, freedom, and dignity for all asylum seekers in Ireland. So we are here today to talk about the living conditions of asylum seekers in Ireland, and in particular about direct provision, that explaining for our public there is out of Ireland is a specific system for accommodation for asylum seeker, specific to the Republic of Ireland. And as we will see, there have been in the last years a few issues with this kind of system, and in general with the asylum seekers process to legalize their status. So we go, gradually to explain this very complex world. As a first question, I would ask you, what is it, MASI, and if you can give us a little bit of context about its work and its campaign that this organization has done so far in Ireland.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us here. We appreciate any platform that we're given to raise awareness on the issues surrounding direct provision and generally systematic oppression. So as MASI, as you've already stated, we stand for the Movement of Asylum Seekers in Ireland. This was originally formed in 2014 in a direct provision center in Cork. This was due to people not being happy with the way they were treated. So initially what they did was they logged out the staff members in that particular direct provision center, and they put out demands that they needed to be met. And it was through that action that they saw the MASI as a movement, saw the need to have asylum seekers speaking for themselves. So it's a group of made up by asylum seekers for asylum seekers. So it is giving the voice to the people who are in the situation. And that was the idea behind MASI. So what MASI aims to do is to see, as you've seen, like the end of direct provision, to stop deportations, the right to work, and the right to have access to education. The reason why we focus or decided to zoom in and focus on these four fundamental issues is because these are the things that affect people the most in terms of the well-being of an individual, in terms of the mental state of a person. Firstly, because direct provision is not ideal to anyone. I think that the government itself has acknowledged that. It had been set up as an emergency accommodation center, but after being set up, no measures were taken to look into the longevity of accommodating asylum seekers. So that is why we've been fighting for end of direct provision center, and we're glad to say that the new government had said they're looking to put an end to direct provision within their year of rain. So we're glad about that, and we're hopeful that it won't only be in words but in action, as well as the reason why we say stop deportations is because you've got instances where you find people have been in the system for 5 years, for 14 years. They've integrated into the society. They've become part of the society, and at any time they can come and be taken and sent back after you spent 5 years, 14 years of your life in a country without, like 48 hours. I can say 48 hours is a lot for these people, because most of the times they just arrive on the spot because they don't want people to run away. So a person is not given an opportunity to really, if I can say, finalize anything. Another aim of MASI is fighting for the right to work. And we're glad to say, in a sense, that we've made some steps towards this, in the sense that in 2018, a right to work for asylum seekers was passed. And this was within 9 months of someone being in the system, they've got a right to work. Of course, it's got its other issues that I think we'll elaborate on later on. But also the right to access education at third level, because support is only until second level. So it also creates a lot of challenges, especially for children who are forced to grow up in the system of direct provision. And that is where MASI as a movement has really seen itself trying to fight for these rights of asylum seekers, to be the voice for ourselves, and not to have people fighting for us, to show people that we have a say.
Yeah,
we are the people in the system.
As I see, the big focus is on self-organization and empowerment, which is absolutely great, because we see that in so many fields that when it's about social or political issues, very often the approach is to make a pro-someone organization, but not to empower people involved. And I think that the work that MASI is doing in that sense is absolutely necessary and should be replicated in so many fields. As you say, we already start to understand that the problem, the situation here is very complex, as so many aspects. Let's try to give to those that are listening to us and have no much idea of the process. What is it about? Starting from the beginning, why? Who is an asylum seeker? Who is a refugee? What are the situation why a person find himself or herself in this situation, and what is the kind of process that follow about that? Because many people don't know that, for example, this condition of asylum seeker needs normally a long time to be clarified. It's a process that can last a certain number of years and so on. So let's try to give a little bit of context in that sense.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is define 3 terms: a migrant, an asylum seeker, and a refugee. So a migrant is someone who moves from their country out of choice. So I make a conscious decision to say I'm going to move to England, for example. So I've got the opportunity to research on the opportunities that are there, personal growth. I've got the opportunity to carry my stuff with me. I've got the opportunity to say goodbye to my family, and I've got an option to return back home if I decide, no, it's not working out, and choose somewhere else to go. So that is what a migrant is. A refugee is someone who flees their country out of fear of persecution. So there's a lot of trauma that's around it. Oftentimes they don't get to carry anything besides usually maybe the clothes on their back. You don't get to say goodbye to your family. And oftentimes you don't get to assess the situation of the country where you're going. It's a matter of, it's my life now and everything else will follow later. And then an asylum seeker is someone who's now in a country seeking for protection but hasn't been given a final decision. So they haven't been granted that status of being either a refugee or falling under what we call subsidiary protection, or having been given the right, the right to remain. Sorry. So those are the three kind of statuses in Ireland which a person can get. Okay, now moving from that. Oftentimes when someone has experienced, such kind of persecution or has experienced that trauma, coming into a country, you're looking for that person to kind of have a safe haven, a place to begin to heal, a place where they can begin to kind of deal with the trauma that they've just experienced. And direct provision hasn't been that kind of system. You get there, you're put into a room with 4 or 5 people, everyone is, and it's not that it's the fault of the people, but everyone is trying to deal with their own situations. You don't have a situation whereby someone is going to assess your level of trauma. You don't have anyone to talk to until you go and request and say, okay, can I please get someone to talk to? And that oftentimes also takes a long time, because now you'll need to get a referral from a GP. And it's not like you're going to land in the country today and you're going to have a GP. So that could even take me 4 months, 5 months, or even longer until I'm assigned a GP. I asked that GP to write me a letter, recommend me to Spirasi. From there, I then begin to heal. But that's already 5 or 6 months of someone being in an environment whereby they can't really express and talk to anyone about what happened to them, about, trying to, like, the situations are different. Everyone's story is different. So when you don't have that kind of support system, it really becomes, it affects your mental state. And I think that's something that's very big in direct provision, which a lot of people don't address.
But to give a little bit of description of a practical situation is, asylum seekers, as you said, are generally people that need to flee their country.
Yes.
For reasons that can be very different.
Yes.
From being political dissidents or being LGBT people, for example, in countries where this is not accepted. This can be to example, if you have any, feel free.
Okay.
Any other, feel free to.
Okay, I'll use myself in this platform because I am an asylum seeker. I think I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and if anyone is aware or keeps track of what's going on currently with everything that's happening in Zimbabwe, people are being abducted. There's no respect of human rights. If you try to speak out in any if I had organized a Black Lives Matter in Zimbabwe, I can really say I wouldn't have lived to tell the story. Okay. And for me, it was actually a similar situation. And it wasn't in the sense of aggravating the government, but of saying that there's something that's wrong. And as a youth, we need to find a place whereby our generation is being affected by the decisions government are being made. But I come from a place where people's voices are not respected. You get someone knocking at your door at 7 p.m. to say, okay, we heard you said such a statement. These are people who've got the energy, the time to get into their car, send 2 grown men to look for a little girl, to try to intimidate you. And if anything, one thing I've learned, and I'm glad I actually got an opportunity to leave.
Okay.
It's never just a statement. It's never just a statement. And now you're living your life under a canvas of fear. You are now going to trying to live your canvas of what if I say this? What is going to happen next? And for me, with my family, they decided, you know what? I think it's best to leave. We'd rather have you alive. And a statement that my grandmother said, and I quote, she was like, what does it help for you to be fighting for human rights when you're dead? You can't do anything once you die. We'll sort this out later, just go. So
it's very hard to say that to a daughter or a grandmother. But that's why I'm asking you, because from a Western point of view, let's say, our media never explain this.
Yes.
Let's say foreign politics, especially foreign politics about countries outside the Western world, are never taught in the mainstream media. So the average person have no idea why people in asylum seeking system need to go away from their home. Or the only news we hear about is when something really, really huge happens, like wars or something like that. Then in that case, maybe they are taught, but without context, without the possibility for the people to understand.
Yes.
So it's very important to explain that. And when an asylum seeker arrives here, then what happens? Because we didn't explain what direct provision is technically. It's a system that is specific to the Republic of Ireland to accommodate asylum seekers in the meantime that their status is clarified, let's say, legally. That in abstract sounds like a good thing. But what's the what's the problem with that?
Okay. So initially, when you arrive in Ireland and you seek asylum, they'll take your statement of your story. You'll be put up in what we call a reception center or an emergency accommodation if they can't find you a place in a reception center. So then once you've been in a reception center for about maybe a month, 2 months, you're then transferred to what we call a more permanent accommodation. So for instance, okay, I'm here in Tulamo. It's a permanent accommodation. And fortunately for me, this is a self-catering center. But those are very limited. Those are extremely limited. And that in itself, if you see someone having to fight for wanting to cook their own meals, we all come from diverse backgrounds, from extremely different backgrounds, religions, beliefs. And if you see someone now fighting to be placed somewhere where they can cook for themselves, I'll make an example with what happened in Kerry, in the Direct Provision Center. After the COVID-19 hit and they wanted to be moved, one of the places they requested to be sent to was Tulamo. Why? Specifically because Tulamo has that allowance to allow someone to cook. And I really found that it was quite sad that we're in a place whereby people are just fighting for such a basic right, like let me cook my own food. Not someone dictate the type of meals that I have to eat and when I have to eat them. Okay, now putting that aside. So the reason why we say direct provision center, let me just give an overview of what direct provision is. So this
how does it look like?
Yes. So direct provision was originally introduced in 1999 to house asylum seekers. And like I said, it was supposed to be a temporary measure, something like 6 months. But it's been a system that has been in use for 20 years. So like it says, like direct provision is directly providing for the needs of people. So it's like the basic, you've got a roof over your head, you've got food, at least 3 meals a day. You've got a weekly allowance now, which is 38 euro. And I do say weekly allowance. So you need to live off 38 euro every week. So your toiletries need to come out of that 38 euro. If you don't like the food that you're being served at the cafeteria, that means you need to survive on that 38 euro. For those that fled and left their families, their children back home, they need to try to find a way in that 38 euro to send money back home for the upkeep of their kids, living off 38 euro. Okay, so once you're in the system, the way Ireland has been processing papers, it's really just been an utter disappointment. I won't put it in anything else. It's been a disappointment. You have someone in a system for over 5 years, 7 years. You don't know what's going to happen to you. I've been in Ireland now for 9 months. Yes, 9 months. I still haven't been called for my first interview. You don't know when you're going to. I've got friends even here who've been here for 2 years. They've gone for their interview. They still haven't gotten a decision, going on 3 years. And this is something that will never give you a place to have joy. You'll never have joy because it's constantly at the back of your mind to say what's going to happen, what's going to be next. So you never really have that sense of peace of mind because of the way the system has been getting processed.
How much time this uncertainty can last?
It can even go up to 12 years. There are people who've been here, like I've got people even in this center who've been here for 12 years. Okay. And when you sit down and you look at that and you ask yourself, is this going to be my story? It's really a scary thought. And I think that's where also like people are affected by mental, the mental aspect of it comes in. People spend about 2 to 12 years on average in the system. 2 to 12 years. And even if you say, okay, they've got a right to work, there's no liberty in that because first of all, you need to renew it every 6 months. On top of that, you don't have access to a driving license. You can't gain a driving license. So already some of the jobs that you are limited to, you're already limited in the things that you can do.
So let's explain this a little bit because before, until very recently, I think people in asylum seekers system, they didn't have the right to work legally. Yes. Then this changed, but practically you are still in a situation where it's practically impossible to work, right?
Yes. So like I
also
said,
the private provision centers are generally, not always, but are usually in isolated places. So if you cannot drive, I mean, there's no work around you. There are no jobs near you. Yeah.
You see, and that's the issue because you have some direct provision centers in places where there is no regular bus, or like where, like you're saying, if you don't have your own form of transport, then really what they're saying is sit back. And even though you've got the right to work or the permit in your hands, you don't have, like some companies require you to produce certain documents. You don't have that because it's seized upon entry, or it's a requirement that you need to produce. Even if I come in within a certain time, you need to be able to present those documents. So whatever it is that I would have been, maybe a company that would have wanted to take me on, they can't because there are certain requirements that also govern them. So already I'm limited in the choices of jobs that I can get. So it doesn't matter whether I would have studied accounting. That's put aside as long as I can produce, the documentation. And that's another thing. I think that's a great thing that people don't talk about. If I had come in as a migrant coming into Ireland, my qualification would have been valid. But because now I'm under a name of an asylum seeker, there's now a stigma that attached to me that we're inadequate, that we are disabled, that we don't have the capacity to think or the qualifications. So as soon as I tell someone I'm an asylum seeker and I produce my qualifications, they're no longer looking at the fact that I'm qualified, but they're looking at the name to say you're an asylum seeker. So it's already a stigma on its own, even in the type of jobs that you can get.
Yeah. No, of course. And this is general also for migrants coming from out of the Western world. That there is this kind of stereotype that there cannot be doctors among them or other kind of professionals, which is, of course, a very stupid idea. And we need to challenge that because it's that the reality of the world is unfortunately very, very different and more complex than this very, bidimensional idea of people that we are also promoted by the media, by the movies. We have things pushing in our minds that we need to deconstruct as much as possible. So we started to have now an idea of what we are talking about, of the scenario. And these are generally structure of direct provision that were formerly before hotels or B&B or community centers, and are transformed to accommodate people in asylum seeking system. And there is very much difference in the different places. So there are places where, like the place where you are, when you can cook for yourself. There are places where there is only a cafeteria and people just can have the food that they provide. And there is also a lot of difference also among the kind of people, because one thing is if you are a single person, for example, and a total different experience if you are a family with children, because that's also the case for some people. So you mean there are people in this situation for years with families growing up in this situation and without the possibility to cook for the children for 6, 7, 8 years.
Yes.
It's incredible, because for every one of us, cooking for the family is part of the normality of the experience of a family, and negate that for years. It's a general issue in Ireland because the homelessness crisis. This means that a lot of family are in this situation, and there is also this narrative of putting in competition this kind of needs, which is very negative as well.
Yeah, I think you also said something there on the homelessness.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues that we've had to face as MASI is the fact that people be like, you need to be grateful because you've got a bed over your head. There are homeless people in Ireland. But I think people need to get to a point whereby you realize that as MASI speaking out for the issues of direct provision, it doesn't take away anything from the homelessness. It is not a competition. Homelessness is as much a problem in Ireland as the direct provision system.
Exactly.
So they should never be put in a place whereby they are competing or one is greater than the other.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not a matter of competition. They are both issues that are very much alive, issues that need to be very much addressed. But that doesn't mean that people should be quiet when they're in situations or circumstances that are not humanly right, which do not uphold the dignity of someone.
And also, this is a way to push down the standards for everybody instead of bringing them up, because the competition should not be for who is less badly treated. Should be, a competition to improve things. Should be the other way around. So talking about this, there is also an element of financial cost for the state, for the system, which is not effective from an economic point of view. I'm talking to an accountant, so you have also the competence to speak about that. Why it's so expensive? Is it expensive, and why is not worth it?
Okay, I'll make an example. Before I came here, I was staying in an emergency accommodation. I was staying in that emergency accommodation. I stayed there for 2 months. So per night, there were 3 of us in the room in that emergency theater. So per night, per head that we spent in that place, they were paying 98 euro. So if you multiply 98 euro by, let's say, 30 days, let's round it up, okay, and say 100 euro by 30 days, that's 3,000 times 2 months, that's already like 6,000. Let's take away the 2 cents in that time period, and let's put it at 5,950. So that's 5,950 euro that was spent on my head for 2 months. So now the idea that was saying that it doesn't even make sense is that they are paying 98 euro for me to spend in that place. Okay, let me put it this way. So it's 700 euro per week that's being paid on my head to accommodate a roof over my head and food. And then I'm given 38 euro. The argument with MASI is that it doesn't make sense for you to pay that amount of money on someone else's head, whereby you could just give people that money, give an allowance to people to say, even if it's going to be 400 euro, let people find their own space of accommodation. Let people rent out their own space. Let people cook for themselves. Let people cater for themselves. Because once you look at such a cost, and then you look at the well-being of the person behind those costs, that's when you really begin to see the magnitude of how much of a money-making scheme it is. And one of the reasons why direct provision center is being ended by the current government is because when they began to look at the costs, 7,400 asylum seekers, that's how many people are currently in the system. 7,400 asylum seekers cost more than the social welfare that it takes to spend in Ireland. And to be quite honest, that is why it's being ended. So you ask yourself, how do 7,400 people cost a government that much?
It's a huge amount of money, and not, there's no reason to spend.
There's absolutely no reason, because the people that are so-called being catered for are suffering. So what's really going on behind that? And it's a good thing that they did the assessments and they found out that for some reason, I don't know where the other money comes in to cost more than social welfare, because I would like to think social welfare spends a lot. But all the same, we're glad that those assessments have been done. They've seen why it is not relevant. And like they're saying that moving towards a not-for-profit scheme, we hope that they really uphold that in the best possible way.
I see. So what could be the alternative? What could be the alternative as a process for the legalization of the status of people in the seeking asylum, and what could be the alternative in terms of accommodation in the meantime that this status is finalized, let's say?
Okay, firstly, I think people should have the ability to be able to begin to look for places of accommodation for themselves. People should be able to have that opportunity to find places of integrating with the communities. Because once you bundle up people in one place, and I'll be quite honest, you can identify really a direct provision center by the amount of people of color or the different kind of, the diversity that's in it. And that's how people are then identified. And sometimes that also then gets off-putting to a community when you just overwhelm a community with people in one place. So they need to have that ability to say, let people go out, let people integrate into the community, find my own neighborhood, find people to begin to integrate into that society. There needs to be that ability to do that. And also for that to be sustainable, they need to be able to have people working. So it needs to move away from a situation whereby people are not able to work for 9 months, whether they're going to make it for whatever reasons, for the legalities of it, to say, like as MASI were pushing that as soon as someone is in the system, they should have the ability to work. But even if it's a situation of like a month or so, let people begin to work, let people begin to fend for themselves. Because as long as you don't do that, you also promote a situation of disability, of people who end up being entitled. And that is not the case.
Because I suppose it's usually frustrating to spend years in a situation where you want to start a new life, you want to contribute to the community where you are, to the new country where you are, to know the country where you are, also to look around your new place, and be stuck in what it's a sort of limbo of Definitely. So what MASI suggests is giving the possibility to the people to self-organize their
Yes.
accommodation and to
Yes.
work.
Yes.
It would
And
be
for a driving license.
and would be a huge saving for the public
Yes.
finance
Yes.
as
It
well.
wouldn't be such a strain to take care of people if they can take care for themselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it would be also also a different feedback from the community, because of course it would be a different way of accommodation,
Yes.
and it would be probably less exposed to manipulation by
Yes.
certain kind of people, let's say. And one question that I wanted to ask you was also, it would be also safer, because another issue that we have at the moment is the direct provision is not a safe system
Yes.
from the mental health point of view. And unfortunately, there have been different suicide cases.
Yes.
And it's very, very, very sad to say that.
Yes.
But also, what has been the impact of COVID pandemic for people living in this system?
Wow. I think I'll make an example of what happened in Kerry and in Wicklow.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, we know that when people were moved to Kerry, there was an outbreak of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
And this was obviously, because of the way people are put in clusters.
Mm-hmm.
We
Because
don't have
it's
that.
overcrowded places.
Yes.
So,
You find 3 people or 4 people are put in, like, it's like, I think to even say a meter is a lot,
mm-hmm.
and it's like you're literally breathing on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, when you're in an environment like that and you clutter people and you place them there, it just takes one person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we saw Kerry having an outbreak of 22 people. And once something like that happens, it's so unfortunate that people don't have the time to sit down and look at it from the perspective of the people that in the situation. Then you see the community now rising up against you guys as if you are you've brought such a curse on the community, or such a pandemic, like
Mm-hmm.
you guys have come to destroy the community, of which I don't think that would have been the case had it not been for COVID. But now, once you find that even the people in the community already are now saying such statements, I mean, it's heartbreaking. Even with what happened in Wicklow, it's not like asylum seekers, are the carriers of a pandemic. There are some places that are saying they're actually not hiring asylum seekers for the very reason of COVID-19, that they're scared that they'll carry it onto them. Can you imagine? And these people don't have it in themselves. They didn't choose that situation. No one chooses to carry a virus. No one. It's said for anyone on any account. And now you're in a place where you don't have control of that. And it's not like you knew, but like, for instance, even here where it's self-catering, it's a communal kitchen. So if we decide to go down there, and for some reason, if someone has COVID when you are cooking and doing, or when you're sitting in the eating area, at any point, anyone coming in from work or anyone can carry it in, because of the space that's in there. So I think one positive thing that COVID-19 has really brought to the surface is so many issues that have been underlying, to say, if someone needs to fight for 2-meter distance, 2 meters between people, I mean, I was thinking the other day to myself that, like, if you wanted to be able to study already, you don't have access to be able to even put a desk in that, because the room is already clustered in itself. So I'm glad, in the sense that COVID-19 brought to the surface how inhuman the direct provision system was. And for the first time, we saw direct provision now really being spoken about. And it's said that media only takes up a story once it becomes trending. If something like tragic or out there doesn't happen, no one talks about it. It's like, deal with it. It's your issue. It doesn't affect us. And with what happened, because it not only affected people in direct provisions, and it affected the community, they were forced to report on it. And that's when so many things, then people began to see that, okay, so this is what's actually happening. And for those people that had the time to sit down, they also saw that we're just as much human as they are, you know. So I'm glad in that sense, in as much as I'm sad that so many people had to be affected for a point to be sent across. No. So I think moving forward, even in terms of the housing system, I would like to hope they learn something from this. And to even the people in the societies, in the communities with these people affected, I think for me, I'd really like to put it out there that don't stigmatize people. Do not stigmatize people because they've been placed in a situation that they didn't have control of. Do not then say you can't come to work, or do not sideline people or blacklist people because of things that are out of their control. I think as a community, we need to begin to come and have that sense of unity and love instead of separating yourselves from them. Come to a place and ask, how can we support you in this situation?
Because it's a very basic lesson that we have to learn from this, that injustice is not only a moral problem. Injustice really affects everybody. If there is a group of people that is affected by injustice, sooner or later that injustice will be everybody injustice.
Yes.
It's really like a virus. And that's why it's in the interest of everybody to fight injustice and not to be in the, okay, you can be an idealistic person and fighting injustice because you think it's wrong.
Yes.
But also it's an utilitarian concept. You have to fight injustice because sooner or later, if you tolerate injustice, it will affect you as well, even if apparently you are out of that. And it should be, I mean, it should be nice to understand that before realizing that, just because it's wrong. But even if you don't realize that, think about how much we are really all, at the end of the day, we are really all in the same space, and we need to support each other. So we have a comment for one of our viewers. There is that thanks you very much for your clarity and intelligence. And I'm really happy to have you here with us today, because we need to listen. If we're listening more each other, I think we would solve half of the problem of this world, and listening about the voices of people directly involved by an issue is the first thing. So you mentioned before that the government is has expressed the will to change this current situation. So what are the perspectives for the future, do you think?
Well, I really don't know per se. But what I do know and we're glad for is that they have done a focus group. So there are people from MASI who are involved in that decision making, in trying to frame up how they can work about it. And I know that it's still a work in progress, but the fact that they're able to bring people from different expertise and involve the voices of the people, you know, themselves, I think it's a good start. Someone once said that if you are not on the dinner table, then you're the menu. So I'm glad that on this time we're sitting at the dinner table and we're not the menu. So we're glad that they were able to involve MASI in terms of that. And I think it just goes to show the amount of work MASI is doing. So yeah, I think there's still a lot of things that need to be sorted out, really, to have the clearer picture and a framework that they can move towards. But even in that, I think the position of MASI still stands. And direct provision, stop deportation, the right to work, and right to access education. So whatever things are going to be done in that sense, I think it's really for us, it's making sure they're around those aims and, those objectives.
We didn't. You mentioned access to education. We didn't talk about children
Okay, yes.
that much. What's the impact of this system on children life? Because as we have seen, it's a so much long process that children actually grow inside this system of accommodation and spend a long part of their youth in that. So how is it for them?
I'll say this with the utmost love. I think children growing up in direct provision are really, personally, I feel like the government has really promoted a generation of broken people, a generation of kids that will feel they're inadequate. And I say this because when you are moved from place to place, from school to school, and trying to live off that 28 euro, 29 euro, and kids will always have like that competitiveness to them, they're kids. So knowing that you're different or that you are poor in a sense, because it really does kind of promote that poverty line. It also creates that kind of it breaks a child, like as an adult, I can explain and say, no, this is going to be for a short time. It's going to pass. I've got the bigger picture in focus. Even as a mother, what you can say, okay, I'm doing this for my kids. But the kid, the one who needs to go face other kids at school and is somehow different and can't understand why we need to be the three of us, in as much as you can explain it to a kid, it's still going to have that kind of stigmatization. So you're creating kids that are broken. And I think personally for me, my fear is that we're going to create a generation through the system of people tomorrow who are going to begin to act out. And we're not going to act out in the best way because they've been through so much trauma, through so much, they're carrying so much weight on them. And I think something else in terms of children and COVID-19, one thing that I think COVID-19 really did bring to the surface was the digital divide that's the children in direct provision center. When everything went online and lessons and classes, I think almost 3/4 of these kids didn't have access to that. They didn't have access to a laptop. They didn't have access to an iPad to be able to begin to further their studies in the sense of all of that.
We have a question on this from the public. If do all the direct provision centers have access to internet facilities?
No. No, they don't. So again, I think this is also another reason why direct provision, because there is no level framework, there is no standard. So it's whatever happens in the center is based on the person who was contracted to take care of that center. So they can decide to provide, maybe in the center, the owner can decide to provide for the basic needs of the people, like the toiletries, and another center can decide it won't. There are centers, even as we speak, like who don't provide internet access, some do. So because there is no set standard or framework of what should and shouldn't be, the people who are in these centers are left to the mercy of the people who run the centers or the owners of those direct provision centers. And sometimes the person running it really doesn't care. You've got situations where owners are saying, what are you going to do for me? They can move you and they'll still bring people there, So no, not all centers do have access to internet facilities. And that's another expense now, trying to get, data, and like already maybe you find it can cost like 20 euro to get data for the whole month, and still trying to stretch that 38 euro.
I see. Talking also a little bit of hope. There is not only, despite the huge difficulties, at least this was my feeling when I was at the MASI conference last year.
Okay.
There is a huge positive energy coming from people affected by this situation. I've seen at the conference young kids telling their stories about doing hours of community to go to school, to go to college, doing arts, doing music. So tell us a little bit also about that. There are projects about cooking business coming out of it, of some people that have been through the system. So there is, apart from MASI, which is the huge driving force around that, there is also the stories of all these people that are, despite all the difficulties, trying to, build a different future for them and for them families.
Yeah. I think, one thing you come to find about asylum seekers is it will basically branch into two, okay, three. Those that will be broken by the system, those that are always going to be impartial, but those, like, one thing about direct provision, it does build resilience.
Yeah.
So like you're saying that you have now all these people who've been through the system, they can relate to it, and now they're coming up with all those programs. But I think also, besides that, I think the people who come in and are willing to partner with people within direct provision centers, the people that are willing to come in and lend a helping hand, the people are willing to come into those direct provision centers and find out how they can help. I think that act of kindness really goes a long way for the people in direct provision centers, and I think for even the communities that are willing to do that, to come up with projects, to work together, to promote that inclusion, that integration. So I think even as MASI, we wouldn't be MASI if it wasn't for the support of other organizations, of individuals who are willing to speak out for our cause. I mean, like anything in life, you always have opposition. You always have opposition. There are those people who be like, oh, you don't have the right to talk. Look at her. Who does she think she is? Like, you always have those narcissistic people. But it should never take away. I think a focus for me, even as an individual, is focusing on those people that are willing to help me. Focusing on those people that are saying we're there for you. And I think with that, I mean, the sky is the limit, knowing that there are people willing to open up their doors, and not in a sense of, oh, we're trying to act a victim, but people will come in and say, how can we empower you, to do more for yourselves? So yeah.
So that's my final question. Let's say that I am a person living in a neighborhood or in a village where there is a direct provision center. What can I do? What can I do to help? What should I do?
First of all, begin by educating yourself about your direct provision center. It is not a blanket, it's not an umbrella experience in all direct provision centers. So the first thing is find out how your direct provision center functions. What are their personal needs? And then from there, try to liaise with the people in the center, build that network with the people in the center, and they're always willing and open to tell you what they need, how you can help, what ideas they might have, and they just maybe need people to partner with. So the first step is, don't be afraid. Of course, now things are different with COVID, but don't be afraid to call in or find out even from MASI to see if you can get a contact for your own direct provision center. Get someone in that direction, but begin to build those networks with people. And then from there, they'll also be able to tell you what's going on. And another big thing is, once you've been educated and now you know better about direct provision, educate the next person. Make sure that the people in your circle are talking about it. Make sure the people in your circle are aware of it. Because another question, or another statement rather, that I often hear is people say, we didn't know that the direct provision center was there, or we didn't know this much about direct provision center. And I always ask this question, whose duty is it to educate you about the direct provision in your system, in your country, or whose duty is it to educate you about the things that are happening in your society? So I think it also then begins to say, with those people that know, make sure that your circle or the people around you become aware. And from that, it begins to build, people begin to talk about it, we all begin to get involved. I think for me, yes, that would be a start.
Okay.
Oh,
And
yes.
that's a good start.
Sorry, before I end as well, sorry.
Sorry?
And also, even, I'm saying just one final note. And also, even if it means offering safe spaces like this, to be able to come in and we talk and we raise awareness on the work that we're doing, it's really greatly appreciated.
Thank you. I think it's the best thing that we can do, trying to know more about issues that are around us, and to think about how can we solve things together. It's very banal, it's very simple, but there is no other way. So I think it's a very good start.
Yes.
If people can do that, and it's already happening, which is the good thing. So let's stay positive, and in the future, if anything happens and we can be of some help to highlight what's going on, think about us, and we will be happy to have you with us again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Amanda. Bye.
Okay, bye.